that option. What we do know is that those B-2 bombers are the only US military aircraft that are capable of carrying those so-called bunker-busting bombs. And
US Air Force B-2 bombers are reportedly heading to a base in the Pacific.
And those planes are heading west. One US news outlet is reporting that the planes are heading to the Pacific island of...
What would the US do if its most secretive bomber, the $692 million B-21 Raider, was nearly destroyed by enemy fire? Would it hesitate, or would it unleash a full-scale response? That question wasn't theoretical when Russian S-500 missiles reached out across the Black Sea and ripped through a US B-21 wing. The answer was delivered hours later as Tomahawks lit up Russian command posts and carrier jets screamed into contested skies. But the story isn't just about bombs and missiles. It's about decision-making at the edge of war. Before we move on, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and like the video. A stealth bomber built to slip past even the strongest defenses suddenly found itself exposed by a missile traveling faster than a rifle bullet, multiplied 14 times. At 34,000 feet above the Black Sea, the B-21 Raider was expected to glide unseen, gathering reconnaissance on radar networks and surface launch positions. The aircraft defines a new generation of stealth aviation, designed to evade detection through its shape, its emission control, and radar-absorbent material. On this flight, the mission was simple: collect intelligence across contested waters and slip home without being noticed. But in the shadowed command bunkers below, Russian forces were already tracking something that was not supposed to appear on their radar screens.
US Air Force B-2 bombers are reportedly heading to a base in the Pacific.
Now, US President Donald Trump is now on his way back to Washington. He has another meeting in the Situation Room this evening.
The system that locked onto the bomber was the S-500, Russia's most advanced air defense platform. Built not only to target aircraft, but even hypersonic projectiles, it represents an entirely different category of threat. Unlike older systems, which struggled to lock onto stealth aircraft, this platform integrates radar networks spread across wide distances, feeding information with near-instant communication. Once it detected the faint trace of the B-21, it deployed a weapon fundamentally different from the missiles US pilots spent decades training against. This interceptor could reach speeds beyond Mach 14, which gave the pilot a reaction window that hardly exceeded a blink. Inside the cockpit, evasive maneuvers became immediate. Defensive programming deployed decoy flares intended to mislead heat-seeking sensors. Electronic countermeasures jammed signals, sending out bursts of noise across the spectrum to confuse the missile's guidance. Maneuvers shifted the bomber's path, dragging it off its intended course to complicate the strike geometry. Yet with speed pressing down so relentlessly, tactics designed through years of simulation suddenly seemed slow, almost blunt against the mechanical precision now streaking toward them. At Mach 14, the missile covered the length of a football field in only 0.014 seconds. Every moment of reaction was consumed by the sheer physics of its movement. The B-21 had been imagined as an aircraft that could slip past confronting fighters.
Mon, good morning. Well, military assets are often moved into position to give the president and commanders options, Guam, but that they have no further orders to move on from there.
Glide around missile arcs and withstand electronic sweeps. But against such velocity, even its complex design was stretched thin. No stealth coding can erase the fact that a weapon with this kind of acceleration needs no prolonged chase. It only needs a fraction of correct trajectory. The impact did not come from direct contact. The interceptor performed a programmed self-detonation, shredding the air with a calculated explosion that spread with lethal efficiency across the Raider's left side. Shards and compressed shock rippled through its wing, tearing structural layers yet sparing the central fuselage. In a matter of seconds, a plane that represented 21st century survivability found itself bleeding lift and balance, struggling to sustain coherent flight.
Even if ultimately they're not deployed. Now, it's unclear at this stage if the movement of these bombers is directly linked to the tensions. Flight tracking data appears to reveal that those B-2 bombers took off from a US military airbase in Missouri.
Still, the pilot's training took command. Stabilization routines engaged as hands forced the bomber back into guarded control. The radio burst out across open channels, carrying the cracking voice of urgency. Aircraft hit! Pilot attempting recovery command and fighter escorts tuned instantly to the transmission, recognizing that a symbol of American reach had now been struck. Though the bomber still held altitude, its stealth configuration was broken. Reflective surfaces were exposed, emissions control weakened, and radar signatures brightened. Whatever remained of the mission objectives was already void. Stealth compromised meant reconnaissance lost. Yet survival added a different weight. The aircraft's endurance turned this into more than a tactical matter. It became symbolic. It showed that the most advanced systems can be damaged, and it confirmed that defense lines are never absolute. In Washington, the repercussions were immediate.
That option. What we do know is that those B-2 bombers are the only US military aircraft that are capable of carrying those so-called bunker-busting bombs, and those planes are heading west. One US news outlet is reporting that the planes are heading to the Pacific island of...
Advisors already understood that the next steps determined whether this was seen as a singular incident or the beginning of escalation. The choice waiting now was how the United States would respond. And that choice rested not above the Black Sea, but behind doors in the nation's capital. A damaged bomber over the Black Sea was one thing. How the White House would label it, accident or act of war, was another. Inside the Situation Room, the atmosphere was tense but orderly. Military advisors, intelligence chiefs, and diplomatic staff stared at large screens displaying satellite feeds and incoming reports from the Pentagon. Every word carried weight because the decisions formed here would be broadcast not only to Moscow's leadership, but to every allied capital watching closely. The questions on the table were blunt: do nothing and risk looking weak, or strike back and risk escalation into something far greater. The discussion moved quickly. Some argued the incident could be categorized as a miscalculation, a clash over disputed airspace that needed a diplomatic channel, not a military counterblow. Their point was clear: escalation could spiral, dragging NATO allies into a confrontation no one wanted. Others argued back just as strongly. They warned that if the attack passed without serious consequences, Russian commanders would interpret it as permission to target more patrols, more aircraft, and potentially US ships. In that view, hesitation was more dangerous than confrontation. Everyone knew what was at stake, and not a single advisor doubted the significance of the plane that had been struck. Because the B-21 Raider was far more than just a bomber. It carried a staggering $692 million price tag, but the true value was symbolic. It was meant to represent America's ability to project force anywhere on the planet, to operate above contested territory beyond the reach of advanced air defense networks. The very fact that Russian missiles shredded part of its wing shook the credibility of that message. To leave the incident unanswered would undermine years of investment and planning, not to mention the trust of allies who relied on that umbrella of deterrence. For every advisor around that table, the aircraft embodied US reach. And by striking it, Moscow had essentially challenged that reach in the most direct way possible. The clash in perspectives grew sharper with every update coming in from the Black Sea region. Analysts confirmed the plane had maintained altitude and was heading back under escort. Pilots described increased Russian radar activity along the Crimean coast. Satellites tracked mobile launchers shifting positions. In real time, the picture of an enemy preparing for another strike became hard to ignore. That urgency narrowed the president's options. It wasn't just about what Moscow had done, but what it might do next if not confronted immediately. The debate thinned to two real paths: public restraint paired with private warnings, or a rapid demonstration of American capability that could not be mistaken. By late afternoon, the task force executed its mission. Tomahawk cruise missiles arced across the sky toward radar domes on the Crimean Peninsula. Russian command nodes and missile batteries were also on the target list, and precision strikes gutted those systems within minutes. It was not an open-ended campaign, but a tailored attack. The Pentagon wanted to send a clear message: every system used to threaten US aircraft could be destroyed at will. At roughly 4 p.m., explosions silenced radar facilities, confirming the response had been swift, unmistakable, but controlled. The shattered domes stood as a signal across the world. Yet what came next would prove whether this message contained its own heavy cost. A single missile strike forced Washington to choose between restraint and deterrence, and the answer leaned toward action. The survival of the B-21 mattered less than the global message its damage sent. Over contested skies, every mission carries the risk of igniting escalation, and this incident proved that even cutting-edge technology cannot erase that fact. The bomber returned to base, battered but intact, while forces on both sides recalibrated their next steps. Symbols like the B-21 hold weight beyond metal and engines. How leaders respond to their vulnerability can shape far more than a single tactical outcome.